So there was a panel on CNN that went a little crazy. It didn't start out that way. This panel consisted of Michael Singleton, Tiffany Cross, Scott, I always forget Scott's last name, and Abby Phillips is hosting the panel. It's her panel. And the question that I ask is, as the host, why did Abby Phillips allow this panel to get out of hand? So we'll start with this clip. This is actually the more mild part, I think, because it gets even wilder and crazier later on. Here we go.
The executive order here's what it says about Chris Krebs. Krebs, through CISA, falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. That is in a presidential executive order, almost as if Bigfoot was real. What is going on?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you. I think this is probably one of the most dangerous things that we've seen from him. And we've seen a lot of craziness, but this is now taking the department and completely weaponizing against two people who just disagreed with him. One who told the truth and was involved as a witness in the congressional inquiry, and then somebody else who has said some things about him. The problem is we're back to now what he complained about throughout the campaign and his presidency, and that was that the Justice Department had somehow been weaponized. And now you see him essentially given a mandate and a directive by way of this presidential order to the department to move forward.
He signed 2 executive orders ordering investigations, weaponizing his Justice Department against people who just disagree with him. How do you justify that?
I mean, look,
Okay. Now she's asking this question to Michael, right? So Michael has been on this show recently, actually. He was on my show. Michael, he's conservative, but Michael is pretty nice. Like, he's a pretty chill, nice dude, okay? For the most part. But they are not going to treat him this way. Like the way they came after Michael, more so Tiffany Cross, I have questions. That's the weird part. Watch this.
politically, my advice to the president on this one would be continue to focus on strengthening the economy. You got to figure out a way to bring down cost. Keep doing what you're doing as it pertains to immigration. We need to increase chip manufacturing within the United States. There are several political things that I think that he needs to do.
All right, hold on. Okay. All right, Chair Michael, I get it. Yes, he should focus on the economy.
Yeah, he should.
But what do you think about the fact that he's targeting his political enemies using executive orders and telling his Justice Department?
But we are focused on it, Chair Michael, and you just said, but Chair Michael,
can I answer?
Pause. Why is Tiffany Cross speaking for Abby Phillips? Why is I don't get this at all. Everybody else at the table, for the most part, is pretty chill. Like, okay, she's talking to Michael Singleton. Why does Tiffany Cross insert herself in that part of the discussion when Abby Phillips is there and she is present? And if Abby Phillips wanted to, she can speak for herself and say, well, I don't feel like you answered my question. But Tiffany comes in to play Captain Save-A-Ho. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird. And it's kind of annoying. Let's continue. Good grief.
No, wait a minute. But you have not answered. But
I did answer. I just didn't answer the way you wanted me to answer. You don't get to dictate my comments to my response on this show.
Your comments are not directed to the issue. The very
yes, they were,
question
because
that
my
she
response
asked.
was
And furthermore,
the focus should be
on the last segment about this not being an alternative.
Is Tiffany Cross Abby's bodyguard? Like, I don't understand this at all. like it literally went from 0 to 10 because Tiffany took it there. It was calm. She took it there. Ay.
Tiffany, 1 second.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Go ahead.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Listen, Chair Michael, you're a friend of the show. You're my friend. Please answer the question.
I answered the question the way I want.
No,
nobody's going to dictate the way I answer questions on this show. You may not like the way I answered the question, but I gave an answer. No, I don't like that. We're not going to do dictating reply the way I want you to reply. Then just don't ask me a question if you don't like my response. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Michael, you don't get to.
Do we not live in a democracy now? We talked a lot about a democracy tonight. I guess not on this show.
You don't get to just change the subject to avoid having to say something that might be perceived as negative about Donald Trump.
No, Abby, you just didn't like my answer to your question.
Well, that's what it seems like. If you were a politician, a regular person on the street would say, well, that sounds like spin to me.
No, you asked a question.
Because it does sound
and
like
my
spin.
response to your question was, instead of doing this, the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z.
May I
that is an
respond to
answer
this?
to the question.
When I said this is why it's so dangerous, and this is an example of why it's so dangerous, and that is because nobody wants to speak out against it. You know, we've been waiting for Republicans, whether it be in Congress or wherever they are, to come up and actually say that we're not going to let Trump's power go unchecked. And when he does something wrong, something illegal, something outside the bounds of the history and the department, they sit quiet.
Is it illegal? Do you believe what he did is illegal?
Absolutely.
Why is it illegal?
If you read the Justice Department manual, one of the things it talks about, actually there's a whole section on whether or not the White House can have direction or communication for a prosecution. That's in there today. Frankly, I'm surprised they didn't scrub it yet, but it's actually in there. They're not allowed to do that. The reason is because you have to keep the department to be completely nonpartisan. That's the charging decision.
You don't think that the head of the executive branch can have law enforcement priorities?
I think when you call and say go after a political enemy, that's illegal and wrong. And I think the tide always turns in the pit.
So I'm going to need for people to know, I really wish for some of these panels, they brought on people that were experts, like maybe have someone there that is well informed about that law so they can say, I know this is illegal because said law. But for him to say, I think, I need you to know, man. I need you to know for real.
Pendulum swings here. When the Democrats are back in the White House, I imagine the Republicans are going to scream bloody murder if the president, the Democratic president, calls the department and says, go after, let's go after the Trump kids and see what happens.
I mean, I'm curious, are you suggesting that you don't think that it's wrong to go after political enemies?
Here's what I think. I think the security clearance, let me just address the order.
I'm going to have to do the same thing I just did to Michael, in fairness to my friend over there. Because my question to you was, do you think that it is right or wrong to go after, for the president to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies?
Why does Scott look different to me for whatever reason in this panel? I don't know if maybe he parted his hair differently. Like, it looks like he slimmed down. I don't know if he looks more muscular or what, but Scott, all of a sudden in this particular panel, he looks different to me. Maybe it's the haircut.
I think it is fine for the president to express law enforcement priorities. I think that the Department of Justice should exercise the same judgment that they would exercise on anyone else as it relates to whether someone should be criminally investigated. But here's what I believe about the order in total. The security clearances, fine. There's far too many people with security clearances. I don't have a problem when they take them away. Reviewing access and dissemination of information, perfectly fine, because we do know some oversteps occurred. Looking at whether the government was involved in censorship, which we know they were, perfectly fine. But I think
he's talking about censorship of his lie.
He's there were other issues. Hold on, Scott. Related to.
So the problem that I have with this conversation is I feel like it's somewhat disingenuous because both parties have done this. Both administrations have done this. Joe Biden did this, went after his political enemies, and Donald Trump is going after his political enemies. And I didn't hear this conversation on this panel on Abby's show about this when Joe Biden did it. You know what I mean? So we have to be consistent, but they're not going to do that because, again, like I said, it leans more one way than the other.
He is alleging that CISA censored his lie that the election was stolen. It is not true that the election was stolen. Chris Krebs told the truth, and now he's being targeted by the government with an executive order.
Right.
I guess it shouldn't be, I don't think it should be hard to just say, this is not what the government should be doing. This is not what the president should be doing. Because if the shoe, to Michael's point, were on the other foot, as you claimed that it was, you thought that was a huge scandal.
Again, I think the president should be able to express his views about these issues. But I think the Department of Justice ought to exercise the same judgment that it would use on any other kind of investigation. Now, what these guys did and whether it deserves a criminal investigation, I don't know. You're a lawyer, I'm not. But I do know this, that like in the case of Miles Taylor, was working in the government anonymously, obviously disseminating information publicly that he should not have been doing.
Like what?
Well, I mean, he was anonymously writing pieces for the New York Times and stating publicly that he was trying to undermine the government of the United States that he was supposedly working for.
What did he disseminate that he was legally not allowed to disseminate?
Great thing to find out. He was a high-ranking position at the Department of Homeland Security.
He wrote an op-ed.
What did he have access to?
He wrote an op-ed.
What did he disseminate to people you don't know about?
He wrote an op-ed and he wrote a book. So what's the allegation?
I think anybody who held a high-ranking position in a Homeland Security department like he did, we know what they did publicly. I'd love to know what he did privately.
They're not allowed to talk about their experiences when they leave government? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that he clearly used his position to try to undermine the sitting president of the United States when he had it. I know what he did publicly now. I don't know what he did privately. I think it's worthy of investigation.
And this is the media that is supposed to be the real news, right? It gets crazier. Like, that's just one part of it. Then there is this particular part where there's an argument between Tiffany Cross and Scott Jennings about China. Peep this.
Reality that we are dependent on so many things to come out of our biggest adversary in the world. They are the enemy, and we should not be dependent on them.
But no, they are not our.
So I don't, you guys know how I feel about this with foreign policy. Scott Jennings has been brainwashed to believe that China is our enemy. If anything, a lot of these other countries can point to us and say we're the real enemy. We're the ones that are destroying these countries. We're the ones that have 800 bases all over the world. It's us, really, if there were to be an enemy to point to. That being said, China is not your enemy. Just because another country is doing better than you economically, and partially part of that is your fault because you send jobs over there. No, that does not make them our enemy. We have to be very careful about the rhetoric of our international buds, or as they would put it, foes. We have to be very careful about that. China is doing very well economically because China likes to make shit, and we don't. We didn't continue to keep manufacturing here in the United States. Even some of the things that say made in America, the materials come from China or Mexico, somewhere else. So Scott Jennings, he's still brainwashed that China is our enemy. No, it's not. You know who the real enemy is? The real enemy is the billionaire class. The real enemy are the donors, the people who are donating billions and billions to these politicians. Those are the real enemies. The real enemies are the people that don't want to give you paid leave. The real enemies are the people who don't want you to have health care. That's the real enemy. But Scott Jennings' job is to continue to push the China bad, America great narrative. Now, Tiffany comes in and says, well, we need to figure out how to work with them. I agree that we do need to work with China. We shouldn't be working against them. We need to figure out how to work with them. But it's the way that Tiffany did it. It's the way that she comes in. And then this happens. Watch this. Watch how she can.
To come out of our biggest adversary in the world. They are the enemy, and we should not be dependent on them.
But no, they are not our enemy. They're our biggest trading partner. And if we manufacture
earth minerals and you don't.
They're the enemy.
Right. But
I'm sorry, this guy is funny. Watch this. Watch this.
Many things to come out of our biggest adversary in the world. They are the enemy, and we should not be dependent on them.
But no, they are not our enemy. They're our biggest trading partner. And if we
manufacture earth minerals and you don't.
I love it because they've got rare earth minerals and you don't. I love it. I love it. I love it. But it's true. He's right. Like they have minerals that we don't have, that we need. I created the video the other day where I was telling you guys, like they cut off important minerals that we were getting from them because of the tariff war, right? So this guy is hilarious to me, the way that he said it. but he's right.
Right. But listen, but like it or not, sure, Michael, they are our biggest trading partner. And if we were to manufacture iPhones here, iPhones would cost $3,500. The American people are not going to tolerate that. We have one of the highest standards of working conditions here. I don't think that we can say, forget you, China. They
so
literally.
Okay. So you're okay. Hold on, sure, Michael.
That part, I think people may not understand. I think Tiffany is a little animated about it, but I think people need to understand that when you say, let's just make all of those products here, those products are going to cost more because we don't have a lot of the materials, or we don't have those minerals that they have there to produce some of those products. See, this is the part that I think people oftentimes do not get into. When you say, let's just make everything here. Okay, great. That means we need to make sure that all the materials that we use to create these products is also made here. That also means that the machines that are used in a lot of these factories have to also be made here in the United States, and they're usually not. Manufacturing should have never left the United States. And I'm clear about this. Like, I just don't understand. You know, you think about how when there was more of a thriving middle class in this country, part of those people they're able to make, I would say decent money. We're able to be homeowners working in factories. But then somebody said, let's get greedy. It's cheaper to make these parts. It's cheaper to get the materials from other countries. Let me lay off all of these people. It's crazy when you think about it.
So you're okay. You're okay if we continue to put our own economic and national security future in the hands of our biggest enemy, because effectively they use slave labor to build stuff, and that makes it better for us. That is terrible.
I am 100%
terrible.
not okay.
Why is he calling them our biggest enemy? You know what I mean? Like, you see the narrative there? Don't put that in their hands. They're our biggest enemy. We're the biggest enemy. It's us. I can't understand it. These talking heads, like on these shows, this is nothing but propaganda over and over again. And they wonder why more people are watching YouTube posts. This is why, just nothing but propaganda. But this is when things get, did I finish? Oh, let me finish this one. We'll get to the crazy part.
They use slave labor to build stuff, and that makes it better for us. That is terrible.
I am 100% not okay with that, but I'm dealing in the reality of what is.
You own a change reality that we are dependent.
Okay, let's get to the third part of this. It's interesting he mentioned slave labor. We have slave labor here. When you look at the wages in the United States, think about it, fam. When you think about people who are making minimum wage, I would consider that to be slave wages, because you can't live off of that. That's why you have people working like multiple jobs. Now all of a sudden he cares about slave labor. But it gets even ugly, because then it gets personal.
Land. You cannot just go and say, I like it. It's mine now. It doesn't work that way. Well, that is what they're trying to do. And in this new world order, yeah, absolutely. When they're looking at Greenland and say, I like it. I want to take it for mine. That is a very colonized.
You have said you are.
I have never ever said we're going to go to Greenland and quote colonize it or steal it.
You're not a member of government, so you're irrelevant at that point. I'm talking about the president of the United States doing that.
You got fired from your job.
You can agitate.
Ouch. So I don't know if you heard what he said, but she told him that he was irrelevant. And then he told her, you got fired from your job. Listen to this.
When they're looking at Greenland and say, I like it. I want to take it for mine. That is a very colonized.
You have said you are.
I have never ever said we're going to go to Greenland and quote colonize it or steal it.
You're not a member of government, so you're irrelevant at that point. I'm talking about the president of the United States doing that.
You got fired from your job.
You can agitate.
Oh my God. Oh my God, no. And I'm sorry. She threw the first punch. She told him that he was irrelevant. And I feel like her coming on to CNN, I feel like this is her audition, right? Like, she was fired from MSNBC. By the way, she spent a lot of time when she was on MSNBC criticizing Black men. that Tiffany Cross. Yes, she did. That's why like some of the black men had a problem with her because she was always trying to blame things on black men, right? So she did get fired from MSNBC. And I feel like this is an audition for her to get a CNN show or something. I feel like that's what she's trying to do. Like, let me prove that I'm relevant, maybe over here. So that was kind of embarrassing, but she threw the first punch. So sorry, like we can't defend you on that one.
Talking about the president of the United States doing
You got
that.
fired from your job.
You can agitate.
Scott, if you want to engage in personal insults,
I don't, but you
what
do.
you lack in the legitimate point, you make up for in personal
I don't, you do.
personal insults. The point I am making is in this new world order, we are looking at countries, whether or not they're an adversary or ally, it is being determined on what kind of deal we can get. And we cannot govern, we cannot legislate that way. We are increasingly isolated on the world stage.
No, we're not.
So if you want to engage in personal
We're
insults,
not
if I were
isolated.
you, I would reserve that for your party, who
We're
is
not
increasingly
isolated.
isolated. Our position
outside of you.
It's not even a Republican or a Democrat thing. Both parties consider China to be an enemy. Both parties do. So you'll hear that anti-China rhetoric, regardless if the politician is Democrat or Republican. You'll hear it from both sides. But that was a something. That panel, I felt like, is this the Pierce Morgan version of the Allie Phillips show? It's wild. But that idea of that panel is supposed to have different voices like come together and talk about these issues. So what CNN has done, it's one of the changes that they've made, I would say since I think when they fired Don Lemon, was that they decided to make a decision to also bring on conservative voices along with what they would call left-leaning voices. I just call them liberals, together, and to have these discussions and these conversations. So obviously there's going to end up being times when there is like some type of tension. But I felt like, even going back to the first clip that I had, Tiffany came in hot. It's like, you came in hot. People were pretty calm. They didn't even want to let Sharmichael speak. That is hilarious. I wonder his take on that. But he's probably one of the more, chill, calm dudes. And she just came in like, you didn't answer her question. You didn't answer her question. My God. Yikes. Abby Phillips, I think, can speak for herself, right? I think she can speak for herself. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.